You've seen the paintings, the banners, the feasts, the noble knights standing tall in gleaming armor. You've been told that castles were symbols of power, beauty, and glory. But behind those stone walls, behind every romanticized scene you've ever imagined, was a reality so dark, so filthy, so brutal, they never taught you any of it. What you're about to hear is the truth, and it will change the way you see those walls forever. These are 15 dark, disturbing realities of life inside medieval castles, the ones the history books glossed over, the ones that made even the powerful wish they lived somewhere else. Number 15. The smell hit you before you even entered the gate. We imagine castles as cold and grand. The truth? They reeked. Animal waste, rotting food scraps, unwashed bodies, and open sewage channels carved into the stone floors, all trapped beneath one roof with no ventilation. The stench was so unbearable that foreign visitors often gagged upon entering. Nobility burned herbs and draped perfume-soaked cloth over their faces. They called it bad air. They didn't know it was slowly killing them. Number 14. There was no such thing as private space. Servants slept on straw beside their lord's bed. Guests shared pallets and hallways. Children of noble families were packed into stone rooms with their tutors, nurses, and attendants, breathing the same foul air, sharing the same fleas. Privacy was a concept that didn't exist. You lived your entire life, births, deaths, secrets, grief, in front of others. Number 13. The food rotted faster than they could eat. There was no refrigeration. Meat was preserved in salt or simply eaten before it fully turned. At many feasts, strong spices weren't for flavor. They were to mask the taste of decay. Servants tasted food first, not as a tradition of honor, but to check whether it would kill the Lord. Poisoning was common, so was foodborne illness. The feasting hall could turn into a death chamber within hours. Number 12. The cold was absolute. Stone walls hold no heat. In winter, even the grandest castles became ice chambers. Fires and open hearts barely reached the far corners of a room. Lords slept beneath layers of fur and woolen curtains. Servants died of exposure in their sleep. Children lost fingers to frostbite. And yet, this was the life envied by the peasants outside the walls, who had it even worse. Number 11. The toilet was a hole in the wall. Known as a garderobe, it was a narrow stone alcove built into the outer wall where waste dropped directly into the moat or down the castle face. No door, no curtain, no comfort. In winter, the wind howled through the gap. In summer, the flies came in thick clouds. And those stone walls, they were stained dark for centuries. Number 10. Rats were not a nuisance. They were a constant, inescapable presence. They gnawed through grain stores, contaminated water supplies, and nested inside the walls themselves. The scratching at night was relentless, and they carried fleas, the same fleas that carried the Black Death. When plague entered a castle, it moved fast. In 1349, entire noble households were wiped out in days. The walls that were meant to protect them became their tomb. Number 7. Children rarely survived long enough to grow up. Noble families lost, on average, half their children before the age of 5. Dysentery, fever, infections from minor cuts. There were no antibiotics, no clean water, no understanding of how disease spread. Mothers dressed their surviving children in the same garments worn by siblings who had just died. It wasn't cruelty, it was all they had. Number 8. The dungeon was not just a room, it was a tool. Lords used it not to punish, but to break people. Political enemies, rival heirs, disloyal knights, they were lowered into underground pits and forgotten. Some were kept in cells so small they couldn't stand. Others were placed in oubliettes, vertical stone shafts where a person could only stand upright until their legs gave out. They weren't meant to escape, they were meant to disappear.
Agreed.
Number 7. Betrayal lived behind every wall. A castle was not a home, it was a political arena. Servants spied on lords, lords spied on kings. Trusted advisors sent letters to enemies. Children were married off at 8 years old to forge alliances. Love didn't exist in politics, only leverage. Many lords slept with a blade beneath their pillow, not from paranoia, but from hard experience. Number 6. Medical treatment was often more deadly than the illness. Castle physicians bled patients to release bad humors. They packed wounds with dung. They prescribed drinking mercury for infections. The physician's chamber was one of the most feared rooms in the castle, not because of what it contained, but because of who entered it and never left. Number 5. Women had no rights, not even inside their own home. Noble women were property. They could not inherit land, refuse marriage, or leave without permission. Their chambers were locked from the outside. Their letters were read. Their bodies were examined by strangers to confirm they were suitable. The castle was not their sanctuary. For most women, it was their cage. Number 4. Siege warfare turned the castle into a slow death trap. When an army surrounded a castle and cut its supply lines, the waiting game began. Within weeks, food ran out, then water, then animals, then the unthinkable. Historical accounts describe castle defenders eating leather, then horses, then things that history tries not to name. The siege of Chateau Gaillard in 1204 lasted so long that those inside were reduced to shadows of human beings before the walls finally fell.
We must finalize the treaty before the king returns.
Everything and said nothing.
If the Duke discovers our involvement, we are both dead.
If the king discovers our involvement, we are dead.
And were
we must send word to the Duke before dawn,
when things went wrong, they were the first to be blamed. A stolen jewel, a poisoned guest, a lord's missing letter. Someone had to hang for it. It was almost always a servant, not because they were guilty, but because they were convenient. Number 2. Mental illness was treated as demonic possession. Lords and ladies who suffered from what we now recognize as depression, schizophrenia, or trauma were chained to walls, locked in towers, or handed to the church. Exorcism was a real procedure, carried out in rooms that were never spoken of again. The castle had its own silence, and those trapped inside that silence were never let out. Number 1. The greatest lie was that power meant safety. Lords lived behind the thickest walls, commanded the largest armies, and ate at the grandest tables, and yet they died younger than many of their servants. Stress, poison, war, disease, power attracted every danger that existed. The man on the throne was always the most targeted man in the room. Every kingdom built on fear eventually collapsed inward. Every stone castle, no matter how mighty, eventually became a ruin. The castle was never about comfort. It was about control. And every system built on control, whether made of stone, law, or fear, eventually suffocates the very people inside it. We romanticize the past because we want to believe that power is noble. But power has never been noble. It has only ever been hungry. If you see the world differently now, subscribe, because the truth is never where they told you to look.